I guess my main associations really are the train station that was once there on one side, Union Station,
Mm-hmm.
and then photographs that I've seen of the Providence regiments that were going off to the Civil War, forming in what appeared to me from the photograph to be somewhere in the vicinity of that plaza, and. So thinking about the old, Union Station, I suppose, was named for the Union. The Civil War connections of that place.
Mm-hmm.
And as a child, I was, as a male child, I guess I was always fascinated by the war monuments, and the various, mortars and various other things that are there, and there's a Civil War monument. There's a Spanish-American War monument, as I recall. There was a World War II monument, and once the plaza was redesigned, I'm not sure what happened to that. It was a very large globe with the names of all of the veterans, or possibly all of those who were killed. I'm not sure which it was, but I remember as a kid, probably with my mother or with my father, someone going there to look at that. And I think parades passed by there. I think that's another early association I had with it. And let me see. And then there's the statue of General Burnside,
Mm-hmm.
Which of course does also connect to the Civil War. And so I always felt, to some extent proud that Rhode Island had a general in the Civil War. It sort of like made it that much more real.
Mm-hmm.
And, I guess that was my generation. I was born in 1938, and the Civil War was still a living memory to people. There were still veterans around, I think there were. And so that's probably the most important association.
Did you spend a lot of time there?
Not really. It wasn't a place where people hung around. There was a place called Mike's Diner. You'd probably run into that.
Okay.
Have you heard of that before?
I haven't.
No? Okay. Well, do you know where the Havens Brothers Diner is, which is over next to the City Hall?
I know where City Hall is.
Yeah, okay. Well, right next to the City Hall is a diner that comes in every night.
Mm-hmm.
And they have, just fast food like hot dogs and hamburgers and I don't know what, stuff like that. And at one time there were two of those. Havens Brothers Diner is still there, but Mike's Diner isn't there any longer. But it's somewhere right around where the ice rink is now. The whole place has been reconfigured, but there was a street corner there by the park. And this place would pull in about dusk. And it was Brown at that point, Thayer Street at that point, and sort of things up here. It didn't have that much for students to do, not as much as there is today. And so we would go down the hill frequently at night to one of those two places. If you wanted to go out and see the city a little bit, and particularly after you turned 21,
mm-hmm.
and could go to a bar or something. One of those two places was usually a stopping place where you'd find all kinds of brown people waiting around in there getting whatever it was that they were getting at 11 o'clock at night.
So downtown was definitely more of a youth-friendly place.
Oh
before.
Yeah. Brown students, St. Patrick's Day, and just regularly. I think on weekends and stuff like that, Brown students would go down there for to restaurants and all. They used the city more than they. As I recall, there was only one, maybe two restaurants on Thayer Street that anyone went to, and there was a little place right in back of the Riston Quad called the. What's it called? The Brown Jug, run by a Chinese man named Kai, who everybody knew by name. And so that's another place where people went that was close by. But anyway, Mike's Diner, which was right there down on the edge of it. So that's one of my actually most frequented connections with that area.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the park itself went, occasionally you might sit on a bench there if you got too early for a train or something of that sort. But I don't recall using the actual park itself very much.
Okay.
And it's not to say that people didn't, but it wasn't as decrepit as it is now. I think now it's kind of like a place where people go who have no place else to go.
Mm-hmm.
And back at that point, I think it was just a park that people walked through on their way from one place to another, and it wasn't exactly a destination.
Mm.
But although it wasn't a destination, it was filled with things that attracted my interest anyway, namely these monuments and statues and things of that sort. And then there's that fountain, which I always was kind of amazed by it, how ornate it is and all of that, but I never thought too much about it. But, much more recently, I've learned that it was given in memory of Caroline Brown, who was I think the granddaughter of the John Brown who gave the original property for establishing the campus. I think it was anyway, the member of the Brown family, whose name was Caroline Brown, and her nickname was Carrie, and she married an Italian duke or some kind of nobility. I'm not sure exactly the title, from Palermo in Sicily, and she died sometime around the turn of the century. I'm not sure when exactly, 1900, 1905, or somewhere in there. And he built that fountain to her memory. And he also built Carey Tower up on the Brown campus to her memory. And so just in terms of my own, sort of thought processes as I walk around down there, it reminds me of the deep roots that the Browns had in Providence in terms of their visibility in the civic, monuments of the place. Not only at Brown University, but also in terms of that fountain down there in the city, and the Providence Public Library, the cornerstone to that library, was laid by a member of the Brown family. So they contributed probably the largest amount of endowment to creating a public library for the city, and they did other things. For example, on Westminster Street, which goes by, I think it sort of doesn't go by the plaza, but it's very close to it. There's a cathedral there on Westminster Street called Grace Church, and in that church there's a church bell. I think it was given sometime around 1820 something by one of the Browns to the church. I guess as they were, I don't know, people gave bells to churches for different reasons, but anyway, they gave a bell to that church, and bells often have inscriptions on them, and they're given in the memory of someone or for some particular purpose. And the bell that the Browns gave there back in the early 1800s was to be rung in the city of Providence in honor of Commencement Day at Brown. So every year at graduation day, and I think there's one other day, but I forget what it is, that bell given by the Browns is rung in honor of, some event at Brown.
Oh. Well, I know when I talked to you before, you said that you went away for graduate school and then also for, you were teaching in California.
That's
for
right.
A period.
Yeah.
And then you came back to
Then I
Providence.
came back, yeah.
How did your perception of Kennedy Plaza change, once you came back?
Okay. Boy, I'll tell you, it was a mixed impression. On the one hand, some of the civic infrastructure was rehabilitated, like that park and so forth. The monuments had been taken care of. There was clearly some awareness of that. A lot of the unsightly parking spaces and stuff like that once dominated that part of the city were gone. The river had been cleaned up. The Providence River was an absolutely awful place in terms of industrial and all kinds of other pollution. And nothing could live in it. I mean, it was really a disaster. And the waterfront itself was kind of decayed and all of that. So in terms of restoration of some of the natural landscapes and shorelines, there's substantial improvement, and in terms of restoration of some of the more civic contributions to the scenery and to the place itself, I think that Providence has been made to look much more attractive.